So we are here today in conversation with Robert Anderson, a longtime resident of the Golden area. And we first of all want to thank you for letting us come into your home and sharing your memories with us. Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about where you were born?
Right here in Golden, yeah, in the old hospital. Dr. Urt was the doctor, yeah.
And what year was that?
Robert? 1927.
So you really are an old timer.
Yeah, I just had a birthday last week.
Oh, congratulations.
A couple of weeks ago.
So can you tell us about your parents? Where did they come from and who they were?
They came from Sweden in 1922. Yeah. And they just, I think my dad came over to Canada to start with before that. Because I got a card, I found a card there, and he wrote back to her. And that was about 1920 or so. So he went back and they got married right there in 22, and then they came right over here. Yeah.
And what were their names?
Andreessen was their name, but they changed it to the short name.
And you said Andreessen, but here we're saying Anderson.
Yeah, well, they changed their name when they came over. A lot of old country people did that, because I know Phyllis's parents are the same way. They changed their name, which was no problem then.
No.
You know.
No, it was quite easy to do, in fact, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and they got Canadian citizenship in the 1930s or so, somewhere in there. I got the information, but...
Robert, you were going to tell us about where you first lived in Golden. Where was your parents' first home?
It was only on 10th Avenue down here that we lived for a while. When they first came over, they went to Lake Louise. He was logging there. And then they came here, and they lived over there. And then they went to Sycamores for a year or so. So, and then they come back. I don't remember that, but I got pictures of me and my sisters, because I was too young then. Mm-hmm. And then they bought this house over here at the end of the street, and we lived in there the rest of my life till I met her.
And when did you meet her?
In 1966.
Oh.
We met in April, we got married in December.
Nice. Short romance?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do the math on that. How long have you been married then?
60, that'd be 48 or 49 this year?
Yeah.
49 in
49.
End of the year.
My goodness. Good for you. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And in good health?
Well, yeah.
Mostly?
She's doing pretty good for her age.
Yeah.
Her mother lived to be 100.
Oh.
Yeah. So I don't know if she'll make it or not.
But at any rate, you've had her around a good long time.
Yeah. And I got back problems in my eye, last fall. I gave up my driver's license.
So, because you lived right in Golden all of your years, all of your early years anyway, can you tell me about where you went to school and maybe who some of your teachers were and your playmates at school?
Oh yes, I walked by the street here in the summertime, probably, because in the winter I walked the other way because of the snow. But I went to Lady Gray, the first one. And then when I worked on the construction in 1953 of the new Lady Gray, that burnt down, 2 years later? And now they got another Lady Gray there. So there was 12 grades there, and most of the rooms, it was 4 rooms. One had 2 teachers, 1 and 2, grade 1, 1 and 2. The third, another room had 3, 4, and 5. That was Mrs. Sanborn was my first teacher in 1 and 2, and Ethel King was my second one, 3 and 4 and 5, and 6, grade 6. I had a lady from Miss Taylor. I think she was from Australia or New Zealand, one or the other. And in grade 7 and 8 and 9 were together in another room. And that was Louis Wells and Lawrence Gregg. And in grade 10, 11, and 12, I think they were both in both rooms there, those 2 teachers. Mostly Mr. Wells taught the high school. But there was only 12 grades. Most of we only went to grade 8 and 9, that's all. By the time they got to grade 8, I don't know, we went. We went and found work, I guess. That was during the war, so it was easy to find a job. Yeah. I was out fighting forest fires when I was 14. I wasn't going to school then either. I was finished. And then I started with CPR when I was 15 on the track in Golden here. I worked there for 3 years, but I wanted to be a brakeman, but they wouldn't hire anybody till they got 21, so I wasn't going to wait 3 years for that. So I went to the park in Yoho Park there for a couple of summers, up to Wapta Lake and on the lookout up there, and we were camped in field for a time, and the game warden at Wapta Lake was Jameson. He had two little kids too, and then I worked on the trail gang on the same area that Jameson was park warden for, and I was up on the lookout there for a while, for a month or so till they got somebody else there. But I was on the trail gang up to Yoho Valley, Takaka Falls, Twin Falls, Laughing Falls, all through there we worked on the trail gang. There was only about 6 or 7 of us, and a lot of them were from Vancouver. And they didn't know anything about working or anything, you know. But I'd been out in the bush all my life, so it didn't bother me at all.
So you've told us a little bit about your work history. Could you tell us a little bit about the kids that you went to school with?
Oh, there's Paul Fewes, Fred Poland, and Beulah. Poland, no. Beulah Milam it was then. And Kranos, Rudolph Krano, and Frank, and Alma. They lived in a house close to the school there. Bud Robinson and Ken Robinson, and Mary Esty, and that was Ronnie Fewes' wife later on. Vivian Vaughn, she was Paul Fewes' wife. And Villa St. Marie, she left, and Barbara Woods, she left after she quit school there. Jack Smith. About 12, 13 kids in each grade. That's all. Mm-hmm. So that's why the teachers had 2 or 3 grades to teach.
So, how did your family get around? And what kind of transportation did you have? I mean, you lived right in town, so did you really need to have a car or anything?
Oh no, we never had a car. No, my dad and mother never drove a car. Here. My sister got a bicycle when she was in high school. She got to grade 12, all right, but I didn't. And she got a bicycle, and so I started learning on that when I was about 13 or so. And then I was riding a bicycle. I got my own, and I rode back and forth to the work on the bicycle. Yeah. And in the winter time, you'd walk. That's all you could do. Yeah. And it got cold then too, and we had lots of snow. It was 40 below lots of times. Yeah. In the old school, had a big furnace, and then wood furnace. 4-foot logs they would put in there at once.
So, we've asked everybody else what happened when your family needed to have medical attention.
Well, we had the hospital here.
Yeah, but you were right in town, so it wasn't difficult for you to do that.
But there wasn't that many people out of town. You know, not like it is now. Yeah. They're here and there and close together, but they came by horse, sleigh, and buggy in the summertime. Yeah, that's the only way transportation was. I saw my first car going down the street probably in the 30s or so, I don't know.
So of all of the jobs that you had, and you've listed quite a few, what was your favorite? What did you like to do best?
Carpenter. I was at Casey's for a while, but I couldn't see any future in that either, working in the store. So I quit there. That's when I went to work when they built that Lady Gray in '53. So I was with Dean and Dan there for 4 years. They were together as a contractor, and I worked for 4 years with them. Then Mike Burnham come along. He was building the bank, and he went to be a contractor on his own. I was with him for about 7 years. Yeah, till he left. He went to Cranbrook, I think. But he had a brother and his dad. That's where I learned a lot of carpenter work from Dean and Dan. They were old carpenters, and Mike's father was an old carpenter. So I learned my trade through them. Yeah.
And after you went to work for Burnham, what kind of contracts did you work on then?
I was out at Mica Dam in '65 when they first built the town site, and they were working on the diversion tunnel for the Columbia River. That was just that one summer I was out there. Then I went to on construction other places.
Were you ever involved in the Parsons School? Did you work on that?
Oh yes, yeah. That was built the same time as the one here in Lady Gray. Yeah, and I got in 1953. I wrote on the blackboard, behind the blackboard. And about 30, 40 years later, they found us. They took the blackboard off. This was at Parson. They cut it out and gave it to me. I got it down in the basement.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. I think it was 39 years since I had wrote my name on the piece of plywood.
So throughout your years in Golden, I'm sure that you attended all kinds of special events.
Oh yes, yeah. I remember they had a rodeo ground down here on Fifth Avenue. My mother used to take me down there. That was when Thomas King came here, and I don't remember, he was made chief for the day or something. I see a write-up in the paper there once. But my dad was working out in the bush then anyway, so my sister, I guess, were going to school, so I remember my mother taking me down there to the rodeo. I have a couple of pictures, but I was looking for them, but I couldn't find them offhand.
So what other kinds of things, like, do you remember, well, of course, I believe that you would remember the building of the Civic Center and what that meant to the community?
Oh yes, yeah. My dad was working on it, but I wasn't. I was working for CPR then, I guess. It was during the war, wasn't it? Or after?
Just after the war.
After the war. Well, I was up in the park and out of town maybe or something. So I didn't get involved for the actual work on it. But I remember they had taken the timbers off the old mill, and for that purpose, that was quite a job, and they got it done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose over the years you've attended lots of events in the Civic Center.
Oh yes, yeah. Bill Hart and Huey Sutton, and there was one more playing. They used to have dances there quite often. And the Rod and Gun Club used to have big game dinners. There was lots of big game to eat, and yeah. There were lots of local hunters, yeah. And during the war, I was with the Pacific Coast Militia Rangers. That was the Home Guard.
Right.
That was mostly young fellas like we were, 15, 16 years old, and the ones that couldn't make the forces, they weren't physically fit. And the First World War veterans, they'd be in their 40s and 50s then. It was too old for them to go back to war. So we used to go up the field and Parson and Moberly and all over, have little skirmishes.
And what other kinds of activities were you involved in Golden?
Well, I used to go fishing down the river here when I was probably 10 years old, 'cause I was just a block away from the river. Yeah. And then we used to skate on the river, especially in the spring. This time of the year, maybe it was 25 below in March even, I've seen. And
So we were just having a discussion off camera, and maybe we could carry it up to on camera now, about the way that the weather has changed in Golden over the years. When we're talking to newcomers to Golden, they don't necessarily believe that there was a time when things were a lot harder than they are now.
yeah, I remember the old Columbia River in 48 is flooded, because the river ran right through here, this part. And now that the CPR is there, it kind of holds the river back, but it still comes from down below. Yeah, the river. And we used to have, you could go fishing down the street here.
What's the coldest day you remember in Golden?
I think it was in January. I don't remember what year it was, like when it was 55 below for a while. Then it turned down to 30 below, and it was spring pretty near. But we never got the wind. After 20 below, there was no wind at all. So that helped a lot. Yeah.
And do you remember any winters where we had like lots of snow in excess of what we get now?
Well, in the 30s we did. Yeah, I remember going to school, wading through 2 feet of snow. We used to get 2 feet of snow at once. Not like now, we only get a few inches. And just like they do out east now, we get all of a sudden, and then another snowfall will come. And in 71, 72, we had 17 feet of snow. And it just kept piling up. That was the worst flood we had since 1948.
It was in 72.
Yeah, I think it was in somewhere 72.
So when you had those deep snowfalls, that has to stop you from being able to move around. And
Oh yeah, there wasn't much movement around, especially in the 30s and the 40s. And when I went to school, there was Dick Broad. He had a horse and a slip or something that he used to come around and plow the snow before the kids went to school. That was the only snow plow there was. There was no vehicles anyway, so it didn't matter. But most of the sidewalks were wooden up to the Lady Grey, and then there was nothing down this end. But there was all wooden sidewalks on one side of the street. Yeah. And past 8th Street there, that was all bush anyway.
wasn't there a dump over on this side of town somewhere too?
Yes, there used to be on 5th Avenue here, the dump. And then they put another after that. This was in the 30s and 40s. And after that, they went up on top of the hill. And they used to dump it down over the bank, right where that motel used to be that they tore down. That was a dump for a while. Then they moved up into the bush around where Garrett Subdivision is. That was for a few years. And then they had one down in LaRue Subdivision for a few years too. So it's been moving around all over till they got this other one, the regional district built one.
And we had a number of sawmills set up here in Golden. And we had the Columbia River Lumber Company,
Yeah,
which closed in 27.
yeah, they had the fire in 26.
Yeah.
And then the plane ran for 2 years later, they say. Yeah.
And then they had also another sawmill. Who had the other sawmill that was down here?
Vic Francine.
Yeah, he had one over here too, didn't he?
He had one over where Gerald Connolly used to live, that 1122 restaurant.
Oh, yes.
This side, or it was behind on the back alley or on the next street. He had a sawmill there, close to where the train could pick up their lumber. That was for a number of years.
We looked at I looked at a map or a aerial picture of Golden in 1960, and it appeared like there was a sawmill in the area or lumber yard or something, maybe over on about 8th Street, somewhere in that neighborhood. Was there a pole yard in town over there or something?
I don't know. I'm just trying to think. It wouldn't be down where that rodeo ground was.
It might be, yeah.
Seems to me there was a sawmill in there. Who ran it, I don't remember now. No, I don't remember who it was. Seemed to me I got some firewood over there once. That could be the one that you mentioned.
Could be.
But there was no other one that I know of, except Kicking Horse down where they are now.
Where did you shop in Golden? Like if you were going to buy groceries, and I'm sure you must have had big gardens.
Oh yeah, we
families
had a
did.
big garden, yeah. It was Casey's. That's who I worked for 7 years. I was a butcher there for 5. Besides everything else, you know, you did everything. Haul freight from the freight shed because there was no trucks coming in. It was all by CPR, most of it. And there was Ralston's store. She worked for them when she first came. There was one Ralston then, Bob Ralston. And that was the main stores, I guess, 2 stores. There was no Over 80 or IGA or anything like that in the early days. Thomas King, he had a store, yes, yeah. Him and Casey and Ralston were the main grocery stores and everything. They handled everything, clothes, except Casey didn't have clothes. He had pretty everything else.
I know, Robert, that you've been involved in a couple of service groups in town.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I joined the Lions in 1956. They chartered in May, I joined in September. I was just a few months late. And I'm still with them, yeah. And I was with the fire department for, I don't know, I joined them in 56 too. That was when the school burnt down over here. I think that was the first fire I'd been on pretty well, in March or April or somewhere. And I was there, then we got married and we moved to Hayward's. So I kind of, if I was in town, I'd go to a fire. If I was out of town, I couldn't go. So I finally had to leave them in the early 70s, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how many years I was with them. Then I joined the Legion. I don't know, in the 70s, I guess it was. I don't know when we joined the museum. Ray Olson talked us into joining it, I remember that.
Well, it was long enough ago that you have a lifetime membership now.
Yeah, we got it here. And I'm a life member of the fire department, life member of the Lions.
And you give life member a whole different meaning, don't you?
Yeah, I guess so.
You've been at it a really long time. So can you think of anybody in the community that did something that was so great that nobody else did it? Who was the best baker? Who was the best cabinet maker? Who was the best at whatever it was they did? You could build anything.
Oh yes, if I had the tools and that, I could. Yeah, I built a lot of furniture for the house even when I was up at Hayward's, you know. And I think the best cabinet maker was this fellow at Nicholson. I forget his name now.
Mr. Bickle?
Bickle, yes. Yeah. He was from the old country, was Germany or somewhere. I don't remember them. I think he was the best cabinet maker. Dan York did all the cabinets in the houses that we built. That's where I learned to build cabinets too. So he was a good cabinet maker too. Yet Dean, he was more of a framing contractor, you know.
Are you talking about Dean Crandallmeyer?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I worked with them for 4 years in the 50s. That's where I learned a lot carpenter work through them. Yeah. Because we started at the ground, at the footing of the building, and we went right through. There was one house there, people moved in and we were still working in there. You know, little odds and ends that had to be done. And yeah, we worked right through it with everything. I even learned how to put gyprock and fillet and everything else, you know. That helped a lot too. I even helped them put in carpet in the schools. Some of they usually hired a contractor to do it, and I would help them doing that too. So you learnt right there on the job. Yeah. Yeah.
When Kicking Horse Forest Products got on the go, they built, I think, maybe 20 houses over in Alexander Park. Did you work on any of those houses?
Yes, we poured, I think, all the basements there. Yeah. Yeah. Then there was another contractor who built the house. But we did build one or two other houses there too. That was in the 60s, I think. Yeah. Because when I worked for Baltakis's house and Owen Brown's house, there was all bush on the other side, where the Alexander Park Estates is. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Brown came across, I live just not far from, just across the street.
Oh.
And Mr. Brown come over, or I went over to his house one day for a visit with he and Doreen, and he said that when their house was built there, theirs was the only one there, and it was all bush.
Yeah, yeah.
And
that was the time they assassinated the president.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. What year was that? In the 60s?
Yeah, 61 or 62. Yeah.
Because my brother-in-law came over and told me about it. He'd heard it on the radio, yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about in our first chat was I was going to ask you if you remembered any of the old bachelors in the...
Oh yeah, I made a list of all of them.
Good.
Yes. Oh, I got about 20 of them.
Where's your list? Can I retrieve it? I'll just stop the camera here.
Stop. Maybe you have to read them out, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll forget where I am.
So John Halbeek?
Halbeek, yeah. Yeah, he lived down on close to Overweighty there. And he was up on the lookout up here on Mount Seven for, many years. And I don't remember what else he did.
Foster Parker.
Oh, yeah, he was a trapper. He used to trap out in the Big Bend there. Yeah. And he lived down by the hospital. They had a sort of a bachelor's lot, the whole block or so, the little cabins and everything that a lot of these bachelors lived in. Yeah.
And Stan?
Haven't touched me. Oh yeah, he was right across this side of the Rat Manor.
Oh.
Right in the corner there.
Is that his little house that's still there on the corner?
Not that big one.
Okay.
That was Hughie Sutton. It was right about where the other building is. Right in the corner.
Okay.
Yeah. His house isn't there anymore. They tore it down.
Percy Bagnall.
Oh yeah, he lived over here on 10th and 9th Street. But he was the one that, he had a lot of 78 records. He had a little shack there and he lived in there. I think he was a track walker for CPR before he retired. And at recess, we were going to school, we'd go over there and get some candy from him. He was a great guy for kids. He liked to give them something. He was always giving us candy.
That's a good thing.
Oh yeah, we knew where to go. That was in the 30s, of course, you know.
Holy Solder.
Oh yeah, he was an old Swede. He lived down where the big sawmill had their cabins for bachelors to live in. There was a number, must be 6 or 8 cabins there, and he lived in one of them. So every 2 weeks or so, he was a big beer drinker, and I would collect a couple dozen beer from him. I'd take him up to Casey's and get about 10 cents a dozen for him, which was good money in those days. Yeah.
Mike Samuelson?
Semistock, yeah. I don't know if I spelled the name right or not. He lived down here, not too far from us, and he come from some old country, Hungary or someplace out over there, and he built a house, but he didn't survey the property at all. Lindsay Langell lived next door, so Mike's property ran right through part of his property, and then he took in the road too.
Oh.
So when the town found out that, they built a street there, and I found out that Lindsay Langell, his property, they were all together, and so I sold it to Lindsay Langell.
Gilbert Santamont.
Oh yeah, he lived next door to us. I have a lot of pictures of him out in the Big Bend Highway, running machinery, yeah, and pile drivers and stuff like that.
Where did Gilbert come from?
He was French, yeah. Yeah, he had an accent. You could tell me the way he spoke. But you could understand him, really. Yeah.
And George Love. George, his father was Richard, I think, and they came to the valley way early.
In the 1800s,
Yeah,
I mean, late
yeah.
1800s maybe. Yeah.
And they had a big farm
I don't know
over in the area where
where.
Columbia Diesel is now. They had a big farm over there. But George was a bachelor for many years, wasn't
Oh
he?
yes, then he married when he was later on, and they lived over in the corner where Bob Simon lives there. No, beyond 8th Street. Beyond 8th Street, I think. Yeah. That's where the fire department had the fire department used to have the wells to get the water from. That was the only water supply except a 500-gallon tank on the truck. And if they pumped too long, it would go dry. So they run out of water. That was bad.
I've been told that George Love was also very kind to children.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he was before I knew him. He must have been. Yeah.
Jack McEwen.
Oh yeah, he lived down there beyond 8th Street. No. Yeah. He lived in a little house there. I forget, he was a carpenter, I think. Yeah, I think he was. But he was getting, all these fellas, they were getting up in age when I was a kid even.
Lindsay Langell.
Oh yeah, he lived right next door, Mike's Samosuck.
Okay.
Yeah, that house is gone now too. It was a log house. I worked with him. He worked for George Patterson and Hedley Dodd for years and years. And he was also a night watchman out at the Chicken Horse or whoever it was then. Yeah.
What about Jake Pinkerton?
Yeah, he had a little, not a farm, just a acreage out across the river. And we used to ski up there. It was a little, not very steep, but it was enough to ski on. And he lived over somewhere on 8th Street, I think, too. Somewhere down there.
George Wood?
Oh yeah, he was next door to us. That was before Gilbert Sentimo. He was a First World War veteran. He had a good pension, I guess. He lost something, one eye or something during the war. He had a good pension, so he didn't work. But he was good to us. Every Christmas he'd bring some fruit or a basket of something. Yeah. And in the summertime he'd buy some ice cream and strawberries, fresh strawberries. He'd bring that over. And on the fence, he'd always buy a Saturday Evening Post. He'd put that on every week. I still got some.
Oh, is that?
In the 40s. Yeah.
Chris and Joe Van Hoopen.
Oh yeah, they lived over here. Second house over here. Yeah, they were both bachelors. They never did get married. That's Betty Holland's
Uncles.
uncle, yeah.
Yeah.
They were both. I worked with Chris out firefighting, and Joe, he was a great hunter and fisherman, mostly hunting. And Joe, he was a trapper too. He had a trap line. I don't remember where it was now. Across the river maybe it was.
Bev Notris?
Oh yeah, he lived across the alley from Glen Burnie. And there's a little house there, it's still there.
Yeah.
He lived in there. That was Mrs. Vaughn's brother, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I know the little house. I've driven by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who owns it now. It's funny nobody bought the land and built the house.
Well, I think it's actually part of, is it Kelly Vaughn's property?
Oh yeah, probably is, yeah.
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 Irvin Robinson.
Yeah, he lived in that was brother to Bud that I went to school with. Him and Kenny were cousins. Yeah, I think. But Irvin, he was a trapper and he used to work for the forestry out fighting forest fires out the Bush River mostly in the summertime. And his dad was a trapper in the winter. They both trapped. They lived down, but just past Lady Grey, where, right in the corner, where is it Glen Burnie's son that lives there?
Oh, yes, yeah.
He's still
Right on
there.
that corner, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What about John Dahlstrom?
Oh yeah. Well, you probably heard lots about him.
Yes, I have.
You know that big monument up in the cemetery?
Mm-hmm.
He lived way down where the Legion had their building, that big tall building on 14th Street. And he lived this side on that road there, and he was a Swedish guy. He lived to be about 90 something, and he inherited the United Church got some money for their church. He donated everything to the community. There was a bunch of school diplomas through him. I guess it probably run out now. And,
Scholarships.
yeah, scholarships. I don't know if there's anything else. I remember he donated $25,000 to the United Church. I worked on that one in '58 too.
Building the United Church.
Yeah. We started in the fall, and in order to pour concrete, we'd put straw on the forms to keep it warm. I gave Daisy Sinclair some pictures I took when I was building it, when we were building. Mike Burnham had that contract. Yeah.
Alf Haynes.
Yeah, Alf Haynes. He lived over here too, on 10th Street. Yeah. I think that's the house we lived in years before, after we come to Golden, before we moved on this way. I don't remember what he did though.
And what about John Van Vermeer?
Oh, John Vermeer.
Vermeer?
Vermeer, I think it is. I might have spelled it wrong there. Oh, he was the guy that lived down on 7th Avenue. He was kind of an odd guy. I was always scared of him. And I used to go to school on that street, you know. I'd go out on the road. I wouldn't go on the sidewalk. I was kind of leery on him. I don't know why. And they never did find him. They figured he went across on the boom on the river. It used to be a boom going across there. They figured he drowned in the river. That's about all I know of him.
Well, that's quite a list. Thank you for
Thank
you for putting some thought into that, because there's
I was writing now and then. I think of somebody.
well, there's some of them I've
more.
never heard of.
Yeah,
So,
I guess so.
Yeah. So tell me what it was like to live in Golden during the Depression.
There was not. You had to make your own. What you wanted to do. If you wanted to play, you had to make your own games up and all that. We used to go to the Lady Grey School and play around there for a lot of times. And in the winter we were skating on the river and well, they had the rink too. We went around that oval all the time. We used to skate way up to Macbeth's.
Oh wow.
On the river, and then the slough would freeze over and thaw out, and it would freeze over. It was just like a glare ice on there, just like a mirror, which was good. Same on the river, it used to melt and freeze over, and one guy fell in the river once, but he got out all right, because where there's a swift current, it's pretty shallow. And you can't see it. That was mostly at night we went over there, in the moonlight, you know. Yeah. Then we used to ski across the river too. Yeah, and toboggan, and made my own bobsled there.
So were times as difficult as, we read a lot about times being really hard during the 30s. Was Golden affected by the 30s as much as the rest of the world was?
Oh, I guess so, in a way. There wasn't too much industry here. It was just logging and the little sawmills, and the CPR wasn't too much there, and the government, road crews and all that, so there was no big industry here. I had a little sawmill down here by the old mill. That's where my dad worked for a few weeks every spring. He'd cut logs. And then he ran the planer. It was right close to our place, the planer.
So you've listed off here for us the names of all these old bachelors and talked about some other citizens of Golden. Do any of them stand out as just being a special character? Somebody that just maybe made you laugh or made you shake your head?
I'd have to think about that.
Probably one or two, I'm thinking.
There probably is a few, or one. I don't know, offhand.
Who was the greatest joker you ever knew? Are there any events in Golden's history that you remember that really stuck out to you, that you were glad you were a part of, or that you just really appreciated having?
Well, I joined the Lions just to kind of, they were going to build a swimming pool. That's why I joined. Because I'd seen 2 or 3 fellas drown around here, so I figured they needed one. And I think that was one of the best projects I ever worked on.
So I understand that the swimming pool was all poured by hand, wheelbarrows and...
Yeah, we had to mix it by hand, throw the gravel into the machine. And Mike Burnham had a machine there that, it was a pretty big bucket. So it wasn't one of these little wee ones. But it was all done, and we put a lot of rebar reinforcing in there, which we got for nothing. We scrounged it here and there. There was, I think, one truck went off the road or something and spilled a bunch of stuff, and we'd go scrounge that out. So they had a hard time to take that floor out, I guess, because there was so much rebar in there. They didn't expect it.
So they just used all kinds of metal. It wasn't the plain rebar that we use today.
No.
Bed springs. And...
Yeah, bed springs or anything like that. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite a bit of rebar too, I guess, but any iron that was suitable for concrete, we'd put it in.
Mom's old silver.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was quite a project, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And one that was really needed by the community because the kids had nowhere that was safe to swim either.
They used to swim down the back slough, we called it, the ones that lived in this area, and the others went to the front slough, where they got, front slough was over where they had this building that they had a little lookout for watch the birds and that.
Mm-hmm. The bird platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of those other kids swam. Otherwise, we swam in the river even. Yeah.
I remember as a young teen swimming in what we called crystal ponds, or there was another name for it too, which was kind of on the way to the ski hill. There was a couple of pockets of water along there and we swam in there. I can't think what the other name was but
Yeah.
we swam over in there as well. And Mom would bring us to town to swim there, out in the valley.
They had a swimming pool here in the 30s.
Over near where the bowling alley is now, there was a swimming pool.
Yeah, right across the street on this side of the garage.
The car wash, yeah.
Well, between the car wash on that side,
Yeah.
that end, right in the corner.
Yeah.
'Cause I never did swim. That was in the early 30s. I remember going with my mother up there, and the Greyhound bus used to stop there. Yeah.
Well, I understand at some point maybe they didn't throw in Mum's Silver, and that pool there got a big crack in it.
Oh, I imagine so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They didn't know too much about the building in those days. Most of the houses were wood. Even the basements were wood, and they'd rot and fall down and deteriorate.
So concrete was something that was new, and they didn't
Oh,
understand the process. then.
yeah. Unless you mixed it by hand, that was the only way. And nobody would do that with a full basement.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's why I can imagine the swimming pool that you worked on was probably quite the experience.
Oh yes, it
Long,
was.
hard days.
Yeah, we used to work Saturdays and Sundays and 2 days in the evening on that swimming pool. Then we did that for a couple of years till it was built. Yeah. That was right on where it is now. You tore it down, the old one.
And now they're talking about trying to get us a new swimming pool in Golden.
Oh, well, that'll
Wouldn't that be something?
be
Yeah,
covered, I
probably
guess.
do.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it would be covered for sure. So you touched a little bit on, pardon me, on the wooden sidewalks in Golden.
Yes. I remember that one especially going to the Lady Grey. It was in front of Glen Burnie's house. And there was no houses on that except one in the corner. It was all bush. But it went right up to the 10th Avenue, I guess. Otherwise, there wasn't too many sidewalks this side of town, this side of the bridge. They're mostly on the other side, I think, in the business area.
Did you play hockey?
No, I never did. No, I never. Same as curling. I never started curling. I didn't seem to find time. 'Cause, I don't know, in the fall I was hunting right from September up to December, and fishing, and in the summertime. There's so many other things to do, I guess.
Pick berries?
Oh yeah, we used to walk up to Cabin Creek, 9 miles. It took us about 3 hours, I think. And then we'd pick berries all that day. You'd walk around all the time, and then sleep there overnight, and then go pick berries in the morning. Then about 6 o'clock in the evening, you start to go home. You'd have about 30 pounds of berries
Oh, wow.
to pack it out. And that was only about 12 years old when I first went out there. I don't think I packed that much the first year or two. But there one year, the fella and I got a horse, pack horse, and we went up there picking berries. We'd have to stay 2 or 3 nights to get enough berries for the horse to pack out. But that was pretty good. But we went, that was a cabin along the old right-of-way, Camp 6 they called it. And we used to climb up, we could see Golden, where we picked the berries. They were the biggest. They were great big ones. You could pick, for half an hour you can get a pailful, you know. And the bushes were only about that high then, because they say huckleberries will grow after a fire. Well, this was probably 10, 12, 13 years after that fire, so they were good, and everything was open. And you see all these big balsam trees that hadn't been burnt, they had blown over, great big ones. We'd walk on them instead of walking on there was no trail anyway, we walked on those logs. We had special corks in our boots even, just for that.
I'm sure when you got home with those buckets full of berries, your mom was happy to see you.
Oh yeah, we used to can them, that's all we could do. Yeah.
Yeah, canned everything, really.
Oh yes, yeah, because we had no freezers, no fridge even. To keep 'em. We had to freeze them, or had to can them.
So you canned your meat as well?
Well, not so much, no, because we always got it in the fall. It would be, wild meat will keep better than the tame one does. But you hang it up, it'll keep for quite a while. But something else, when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, we used to go across the river on a boom picking Saskatoons. And there was lots of Saskatoons then in those days. And we used to have to can them or make juice or something out of them, because they wouldn't keep. Yeah.
So is there anything else that you'd like to add to this conversation? We've asked you a lot of questions. So.
Oh, well, in the places I worked, from here up to, way up to Fernie and way up to past Elkford. We were working on a breaker station when they first opened up there. That was in the early 70s. And when I got to Elkford that first time, there was only a trailer there. That's all there was. And I had to stop and ask him where this job site was. And it was about 20 miles further on. But just like going over the old Big Bend Highway. Then I was at a trail working on a big building there, and I've been all Fairmont and Radium and all over in there. And out in the west, Rogers Pass, we worked on the snow sheds and the bridges there when they were logging. CPR moved Beavermouth. They cut that right off for pushers. I was working on that job where they rebuilt the highway, or the railroad, for a couple of summers. We had to build some bridges and whatnot. Beavermouth was all flooded now.
Well, thank you. That's about it, I think, for our questions.
Yeah, okay.
And really appreciate you going the extra mile to help us with all these old bachelors.
I'll probably think of some more.
You might think of some more, yeah. Because they're part of what we were doing with this project is just trying to remember people in Golden that others might have forgotten or never knew.
No.
And I've worked with a lot of old family names, but there's definitely some on this list I had never heard before. So it's really great.
Do you want to see some pictures?
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.